Thanks, Eileen. You are meeting some really neat people out there in the exhibit hall, and I hope that our city officials are also meeting these folks and learning about the great services and programs they have to offer. I think it's not just an exhibit hall, it's a solutions place. We're finding answers to a lot of, problems or challenges that cities have. There are companies that have the answers to that. So I hope folks are getting out there and meeting everybody and picking up cards and getting some great information. We are going to turn our attention to the concurrent sessions we've got going on tomorrow. And one of those, Peter, you are going to be there. It's Peter Floyd with Alston and, am I saying that right? Yes,
Alston and Bird.
Alston and Bird. Just like I always, the law firms I always get all messed up on. But you are doing a session tomorrow on economic development. And this is something, our city officials, they live, breathe, it's near and dear to them. And I think sometimes we talk about it, but it's sometimes very difficult to do. And you really stress this regional concept. So give me a little, give us a little preview of some of the things that you're going to talk to folks about tomorrow.
Well, let me start with what we're going to talk about in the session, and some of that focuses on regional cooperation, but other things are looking at downtown innovation, looking at promoting entrepreneurs, promoting small businesses, giving them the resources they need to grow. I had a session yesterday, and one of the quotes I remembered that resonated with me was that one of the main purposes of a city is creating an environment to foster growth. And so that's
true.
what our panelists are going to be talking about.
Okay.
We have 3 different communities represented, ranging from very small cities to medium-sized and then large cities. Some that have technical schools to assist them in doing these types of efforts, some that don't, some that have state universities.
And that's a good point, because the different size of the cities and the different resources, because I think sometimes one of the stumbling blocks that cities or city officials express is, we just don't have the resources of an Atlanta or, a larger city, but it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to be a larger city to do that.
And that brings it full circle to what you're talking about cooperation and regional effort. You need to be looking at your partners, especially as a rural city or a smaller city, at who all your partners are, not just in your county, not just the neighbors but looking at who you should be partnering with based on how you want to grow and what your regional assets are.
So you should basically start with your end game in mind?
Well, I think you should.
Know where you want to go?
And you need to be bringing in not just your local community partners, but the private sector, because they know. They know what's working in the area. They know to the extent that you may not, because you're not in the private sector, what's working for them, what's not working for them, and what they may be missing that would help them grow or help them be able to recommend that area for another sector that may want to move to your area.
You mentioned early on about the fostering entrepreneurs, and it seems to me, and this is just kind of a looking across the state observation, that since the economic recovery has started, there's a lot more of that it actually, that the entrepreneur movement kind of is what came out of that recession, is that people just went off and did their own thing. Am I totally wrong on this, or is this?
No, I think that's right. I think that there was obviously during the downturn some downsizing. Some people had to were forced to look for other careers. When the downturn was in full force, people coming out of school didn't have a ready-made job waiting for them, so they had to become competitive entrepreneurs.
How can cities help them?
Well, some of the things we're going to talk about tomorrow include co-working spaces, small office spaces that can be used, that the cities themselves can help put into place. They can partner with local schools. In one of these cities, a local for-profit business opened and renovated an existing facility downtown and turned that into a co-working space. And then providing training, which again comes back to partnering with schools.
What kind of training?
Well, how to do a business plan, what the sources of capital for new entrepreneurs are. Getting a new business off the ground is not easy.
Right. And I was talking to somebody with the Makers Movement a couple of years ago, and he said one of the things that they do is, they provide the space for people to come together and learn from each other, because you may have the ability to make something, but you don't have the ability to balance your books. So you could partner up with somebody who can teach you those particular
That's
skills.
right. And in a number of the communities that are going to be on my panel tomorrow, they're doing just that.
Okay.
They have people who are in successful businesses that are coming and helping train these folks on how to do business plans, how to do their finances, how to market.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Just basic training, because they may be, as you pointed out, very good at a particular skill, but if you can't bring it to market, it's not a business.
Give us some examples you think of cities in Georgia that are doing a really good job with.
Well, one of my panelists tomorrow is from Cedartown. They have a Biz Builder program where they've partnered with the local technical school. They have a 6-month program where they're providing office space, the co-working space that I'm talking about, training on all the things that I've been talking about.
And the technical schools are a great resource for cities around the state. I mean, they should be looking
And if
to
they
them.
don't have one that's in their community, there are ways to partner with them where they can make space available for the technical schools to do outreach programs in their community. The universities do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, not just for local entrepreneurs, but also to show when you're doing larger scale economic development that you have that workforce development there in the area.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted. You had some other examples of cities that are doing well.
Sure. Two of our other speakers, one is from Douglasville. That was the example that I had where a local, another entrepreneur renovated a facility that make co-working space available for other entrepreneurs, and the city's now working with them to help foster that and make sure that the community knows about that. Statesboro has partnered with their university, Georgia Southern, and they have a co-working space that Georgia Southern has opened up in downtown. The city's working carefully with them to make sure that entrepreneurs are finding out about this. They're getting that support they need early on.
Well, and the co-working space, I think, is an interesting new movement because, the technology enables so many people to work from home. They don't have to go into an office, but there are times when they need to be in an office-like space, or and I think this having a space in the downtown, especially because that drives people to the restaurants and to the retail stores there, having this co-working space where you can sometimes, when you need to,
well,
be amongst
and
other.
it's not just flex office space.
Right.
That is a big component to it,
Right.
but it brings you around other entrepreneurs that are going through what you're going through, and you can then find those ways to collaborate, like you were talking about.
And creativity breeds creativity.
Absolutely.
When you're around creative people, it makes you, I think, that much more creative. It pushes you.
And when you get all of those young entrepreneurs together in that space, that's a great way for the city then to say, we can help provide programming to you to help you.
And I think one thing that's interesting when we talk about the younger, the millennials, those younger generation, is that they naturally tend to work. I think that it's that generation that they work collaboratively.
That's right.
They don't have ideas and hold them to themselves. They grew up in a sharing environment where they share those, so that's much more natural for them. And maybe as they, as the one generation moves out and the next generation comes in, this regionalism that we talk about that is so difficult to achieve sometimes, perhaps that will be a more natural thing as these folks move into leadership positions as well.
I think that's a good comment, and I think that hopefully that I hadn't really thought of it that way, that coming from that sort of shared background, when they come into leadership, that it'll be more natural.
We were talking just earlier about the difficulty sometimes, and you see, what are those obstacles of getting people to think not just about their city, but think about their county, their region, and to kind of put their own competitiveness or we want our pick our city type. How do you work around that?
Oh. The rising tide floats all boats. I think that even cities that aren't naturally collaborative with their neighbors, if you think about, especially if they do an analysis of what they have and they're missing resources they can use to attract the kinds of businesses that they want to attract, if they look to their neighbors, those neighbors have those. So even if they're not naturally inclined to lock arms and join action and step ahead that way, they can look at that as a way of not having to build those assets. That they can lean on their neighbors.
So like a puzzle piece, they can say, this is our piece of the puzzle. With this piece, we can make an entire picture.
That's right. And it's not just about looking at the end game. You have those investments you have to make in your infrastructure before you can get to the end game. So if you can share in the cost of that infrastructure and building that environment in a way that works, especially in a smaller community that has revenue restrictions,
Yeah.
then you can achieve that jointly where you couldn't achieve that, at least not as quickly individually.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be a great session tomorrow. Unfortunately, it does compete with the session I'm putting on, but I'll let people go to yours too.
Go ED.
I'm going to serve cookies at mine. I'm tossing down the gauntlet on this one. I hope nobody holds me to that. But thank you so much for being here and for sharing the information that you're going to in the session tomorrow. I mean, economic development is so huge for all our cities, and it's great, to give them a different perspective, make them think about it differently. I think this is going to be great. So thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it and look forward to your session tomorrow.
Thank you for the opportunity to compete with you.
You got to one-up cookies.
Yeah.
Aileen, we're going to go back out to you out in the hall. Look forward to meeting some more exhibitors.